Remember all that talk about a new Cold War? Well, this potential agreement between Trump and Putin on Ukraine, it might be the first shot fired. This is a bold move. Both leaders are really pushing for a resolution to this conflict.
What's fascinating here is they're not aiming for just a ceasefire.
Right.
We're diving into analysis from
Okay.
name of source in Arabic, then translated to English.
All right.
And it suggests a complete resolution is on the table,
Wow.
which is pretty amazing. And what's even more intriguing is this analysis is from a non-Western perspective.
Oh, okay.
So it's going to give us a fresh angle on this whole situation.
That's right. Yeah, it's not the usual U.S. or European take.
Right.
And this source, it really digs into how global power dynamics are shifting, especially as we head towards 2025. They even highlight China's growing economic influence in Africa as a key factor in this whole power shift,
Yeah.
which could explain why these talks are happening right now.
It's all about timing. The war in Ukraine has been dragging on. And while Russia's made some battlefield gains,
Right.
their economy is feeling the pinch from those sanctions. You know, the ones we've talked about before.
Right.
On the other side, the U.S. and European support for Ukraine has been a bit shaky lately.
So everyone's feeling the pressure.
Absolutely.
But this analysis paints Trump's move as like a calculated gamble.
It definitely aligns with his America First approach.
Yeah.
Reducing U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts has always been a priority for him. And brokering peace in Ukraine before the next election.
Oh, yeah.
That would be a major political win.
Talk about a legacy moment. But the source points out that his choice of negotiators, Marco Rubio and John Ratcliffe, is interesting. They're both known for their hawkish stance on Russia.
That means they're likely to advocate for a strong military response and oppose any concessions that might be seen as appeasement.
So why would Trump pick them?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is he trying to appease his critics? Or is this a deliberate strategy to play hardball with Putin? It's a gamble.
It makes you wonder if he's setting himself up for a potential showdown with Congress.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got Trump, the deal maker, trying to pull off a high-stakes maneuver, but what about Putin?
Right.
The source suggests he has a long game in mind here. What do you make of that?
Well, Putin's playing a power game on multiple levels. He wants to secure control over the territories that Russia has already occupied and get some relief from the economic pressure. But dragging out the negotiations could actually play to his advantage.
Hold on. How does delaying things help Putin?
Every day the war continues, his position gets a little bit stronger. He can consolidate his hold on those occupied territories. Meanwhile, the pressure on the U.S. and Europe to find a solution, it just keeps growing. It's like he's waiting for them to blink first.
So we've got these two leaders, each with their own agenda, coming to the table. Sounds like a recipe for some serious fireworks. But there's one major player missing from this whole equation, Ukraine itself.
Right?
Remember, they weren't even part of these initial talks.
Imagine you're Zelensky in this situation. How would you react to being told, we're deciding the future of your country, no need to be involved?
I can only imagine the phone calls flying back and forth. Hey, by the way, we're just deciding the future of your country. Pizza.
Exactly.
They fought tooth and nail for their territory, and they're not going to just roll over and accept whatever deal Trump and Putin cook up.
Especially if it involves conceding control of regions like Donbass and Crimea.
Right.
That's a huge EE ask. And it's not just Ukraine that might throw a wrench in the works. Europe isn't exactly a united front on this issue either.
Okay, so you've got Ukraine potentially resisting any agreement, and Europe isn't exactly on the same page.
Right.
What does that mean for the chances of these talks actually succeeding?
That's what we'll explore next. This analysis actually lays out 3 possible scenarios,
Okay.
each with its own set of consequences.
All right, let's dive into those scenarios and see what the future might hold for Ukraine, and maybe even the whole world. So we've laid out the motivations, the key players, and the potential for some serious roadblocks.
Oh, yeah.
But let's get into the nitty-gritty here. What are the possible outcomes of these talks, according to this analysis?
Well, they outlined 3 potential scenarios. Partial success, breakdown, and a comprehensive settlement.
Okay.
The first one, partial success, is probably the most likely. But it's not exactly a clean win for anybody involved.
So what does partial success look like in this situation? Another frozen conflict?
Yeah, it would involve a ceasefire, expanded negotiations to include Ukraine and other key players, and maybe some minor concessions from Russia, like prisoner exchanges or opening up humanitarian corridors.
Okay.
They might ease some of the sanctions, but it's not a complete rollback.
So kind of like hitting the pause button on the conflict. No real resolution, just a temporary halt.
Exactly. And you can already see where the issues might pop up. Would Ukraine even agree to this? And what about those European nations that are deeply skeptical of anything that strengthens Putin's hand? They might see this as a betrayal and refuse to play along.
It sounds like this partial success might be more trouble than it's worth. What about the breakdown scenario? What happens if these talks completely fall apart?
That's where things could get really dangerous.
Yeah.
Imagine Russia digging in its heels, refusing to budge on its demands, and maybe even escalating the conflict. This analysis doesn't rule out the possibility of a full-blown invasion of the rest of Ukraine.
A wider war with NATO potentially getting pulled in, that's a terrifying thought.
It is, and it highlights the high-stakes nature of these talks. The breakdown scenario isn't just about Ukraine anymore. It could draw in major global powers and have devastating consequences for everyone.
Okay, so we've got the meh outcome and the absolutely disastrous one. What about the opposite? What would a positive outcome look like? Is there even a possibility of a comprehensive settlement?
There is, but the analysis calls this the least likely scenario. And to be honest, it does sound a bit like a fairy tale ending. Imagine this. Russia agrees to a partial withdrawal from some of the occupied territories in exchange for long-term security guarantees.
Okay.
Ukraine, in turn, pledges to remain neutral, meaning no joining NATO.
So everyone gets something, but no one gets everything.
Right.
It's compromise on a grand scale. But you said this is the least likely outcome. Why is that?
Well, for starters, it requires a level of trust and goodwill that's pretty much non-existent between these parties right now. Could Zelensky really sell this kind of deal to the Ukrainian people after everything they've been through? And would Putin actually be willing to give up any of the territory he's already seized?
Not to mention the ripple effects this would have on global alliances. A neutral Ukraine, it throws a wrench into NATO's expansion plans, and it might embolden other countries to rethink their allegiances.
Exactly. The comprehensive settlement, while appealing on the surface, is incredibly complex and would require a seismic shift in the geopolitical landscape. It's not impossible, but it's definitely a long shot.
It sounds like no matter which way this goes, the consequences are going to be huge. But I'm curious, this source makes a big deal about 2025 being some kind of turning point in global power dynamics. How does this whole Ukraine situation fit into that bigger picture?
That's what makes this whole situation so fascinating. It's not just about Ukraine. It's about the changing world order and the struggle for power and influence on a global scale.
So let's step back for a moment and take a look at the bigger picture. So we're talking about a potential turning point in global power dynamics. And this whole Ukraine situation is right at the center of it.
Right.
It's like we're watching history unfold in real time.
It really is. You know, we often hear about a multipolar world order emerging, with the U.S. no longer calling all the shots.
Right.
Well, this Trump-Putin agreement, if it happens, could be a major step in that direction.
Because it would show that the U.S. isn't the only one who can broker deals on the world stage.
Think about it from Putin's perspective.
Okay.
If he pulls this off, he's suddenly a major power broker.
Yeah.
Someone who can stand up to the West and get what he wants. It would send a message to other countries that are looking for alternatives to the U.S.-led system.
I'm starting to see how this goes way beyond Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's about the whole balance of power shifting.
Right. The U.S. is still a major player, of course, but they're not the undisputed global hegemon they once were.
Right.
China's influence is growing rapidly, particularly in areas like economics and technology.
Yeah.
And Russia, well, they're clearly trying to assert themselves on the world stage, too.
So this Trump-Putin agreement, no matter the outcome, could be a catalyst for even bigger changes down the line.
That's the key takeaway here. Whether it's a partial success, a breakdown, or a comprehensive settlement, the ripple effects will be felt far and wide. It's a reminder that the world is in constant flux, and the old rules don't necessarily apply anymore.
It's a lot to wrap our heads around.
Sure.
But I think that's what makes this so compelling. We're not just talking about abstract geopolitical theories here.
Right.
We're talking about real-world events that are shaping the future, our future.
And that's why it's so important to stay informed and to think critically about what's happening. Don't just accept the headlines at face value.
Right.
Dig deeper, question your assumptions, and try to understand the different perspectives at play.
That's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive. We're not here to tell you what to think,
Right.
but to give you the tools to form your own informed opinions. We've unpacked this analysis, explored the possible outcomes, and connected it to the bigger picture of global power dynamics.
Absolutely.
Now it's up to you to decide what it all means.
That's right.
What kind of future do you see emerging from this, and what role do you think the U.S., Russia, China, and other global players will play?
Big questions.
It's a lot to ponder, and I'm sure this is just the beginning of the story. The world is changing, and we're all along for the ride. Keep asking questions, keep challenging the status quo,
Definitely.
and most importantly, keep diving deep.